Most people don't waste their lives because they choose to. They waste them quietly, by staying in jobs they hate, by numbing themselves with endless distractions, by putting off what matters until later, and then one day realizing that later never came. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But here's the problem. Most of us never even start that journey. Today, we're going to talk about what it really means to stop wasting your life through the lens of Jung's psychology, and how to take that first step before the years slip through your fingers. Jung didn't use the word procrastination in the way we do now, but he understood something deeper, that avoidance, distraction, and staying small are symptoms of the same root problem. We're living someone else's script. He called this living only through the persona, the mask we wear to fit into the world. And the more we cling to that mask, the more the real self, the self with a capital S, gets buried. Jung believed that this disconnection isn't harmless. It doesn't just make you bored or restless. It creates a deep psychic tension, a kind of slow spiritual suffocation. If you've ever woken up and thought, "Is this really my life?" You've felt it. Let me tell you about someone Jung actually worked with. In his memoir, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, he writes about a successful businessman who came to him not because he was in crisis, but because life felt meaningless. He had money, security, status, but inside he felt like a shadow of himself. Through their sessions, a recurring dream kept appearing: an old cabin in the woods and an elderly man carving wood in the sunlight. At first it seemed irrelevant, but over time, Jung helped him see that this was not a random dream. It was an image of what his inner self longed for: creativity, solitude, the work of his own hands. Years later, this man left his corporate life. He didn't run away impulsively. He simply began carving out time to sculpt, and eventually that became his life. This isn't a romanticized fairy tale. It's a case Jung documented to illustrate a truth. When the self calls, ignoring it feels safe, but answering it is the only way to feel alive again. The central thread here is this: wasting your life isn't about doing the wrong things. It's about ignoring the voice inside that tells you who you are and what matters to you, and you can't fake your way past that voice forever. Jung warned in The Undiscovered Self, the greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents. In other words, when we bury our real calling, we don't just rob ourselves, we pass that habit of repression on to others. The next generation inherits not only our genetics, but also our fears, our compromises, and our unspoken regrets. Think about it. How much of your day is truly yours? Not in theory, but in reality. How many hours do you spend doing what you're supposed to do versus what your soul is actually asking for? Jung wouldn't tell you to quit your job tomorrow, but he would tell you this: the longer you live only in your persona, the harder it becomes to hear yourself at all. It's like living in a house where one room is locked. You walk past it every day, pretending it doesn't exist. But sometimes, in the quiet, you hear music coming from inside. You can ignore it for years, but eventually the music either fades and a part of you dies with it, or you find the courage to open that door. Step 1. Notice the tension between your outer life and inner life. Write down what your typical week looks like. Then write down what an ideal week would look like, not in a fantasy sense, but in terms of energy, creativity, and purpose. The gap between those two lists is where your self is speaking. Step 2. Start a small act of individuation. Individuation is Jung's word for becoming fully yourself. You don't need to upend everything, but you do need to start. This could be as simple as reclaiming 30 minutes a day for something that feels deeply yours: painting, writing, studying a subject that's always fascinated you. Step 3. Confront your shadow around change. Your shadow is the part of you that holds fear, shame, and unacknowledged desires. Every time you think, "People will laugh at me," or it's too late. That's shadow work knocking at your door. Jung's advice: don't fight it by pretending you're fearless. Meet it with curiosity. Ask, where is this fear coming from? And what would happen if I acted anyway? We live in a time when distractions are endless. We can avoid facing ourselves for entire lifetimes if we want to, but Jung would warn us. The unconscious doesn't go away when ignored. It gets louder, more restless, more destructive, sometimes in the form of burnout, sometimes in anxiety, sometimes in a sudden life crisis that forces you to change. So maybe the real question isn't, how do I stop wasting my life? Maybe it's, how do I start listening before life forces me to? Facing the truth of your own life isn't comfortable. In fact, Jung would say it's one of the most unsettling things you can do, because it forces you to meet the parts of yourself you've kept in the dark. When you decide to stop wasting your life, you're not just saying, I'm going to be more productive, or I'll finally change careers. You're saying, I'm going to dismantle the illusion that I am only who I pretend to be. And that's scary, because what happens if you find out that the real you doesn't match the expectations of your family, your peers, or even your younger self? Jung knew that most people never cross that threshold. They choose familiarity over authenticity. That's why he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Let's be honest, sometimes it's easier to say, well, this is just how things are, than to admit, I've been avoiding the life I actually want. But here's the thing, the fear you feel about change is not a sign to stop. It's proof you're getting closer to the truth. Take the example of Jung himself. In the middle of his career, respected, secure, he went through what he called a confrontation with the unconscious. For years, he stepped back from his professional life to explore his dreams, his visions, and his inner world. From the outside, it looked reckless, even self-destructive. But this period became the foundation of his greatest work. He understood that the path to a meaningful life often requires passing through a wilderness where nothing feels certain. So how do you step into that uncertainty without being paralyzed by it? Here are 3 guiding principles for this stage. 1. Accept that discomfort is part of the process. You can't grow and stay comfortable at the same time. When fear and doubt show up, remind yourself, these feelings mean I'm on new ground. 2. Anchor yourself in small, daily acts. It's tempting to wait for some big leap, but meaning is built in small, consistent choices. 10 minutes spent on your craft every day is more transformative than one burst of inspiration a year. 3. Seek honest mirrors, not cheerleaders. Find people who aren't just going to tell you, follow your dreams, but will ask you the hard questions, notice your blind spots, and encourage you to stay aligned with your true direction. The truth is, individuation, the process of becoming fully yourself, has no finish line. You'll face new masks to remove at every stage, but the first step is always the same. You stop pretending you're fine when you're not, and you start asking, what is my life actually for? And here's something liberating. You don't have to know the full answer today. You just have to be willing to move toward it. When Jung wrote The Undiscovered Self, he wasn't just talking to therapists or academics. He was warning ordinary people. The danger of a life unlived is bigger than your own disappointment. When you don't live your truth, the world loses the unique voice only you could have given it. Think of the people you admire, not because they were perfect, but because they were fully themselves. They didn't waste their years trying to blend in. They made choices that felt impossible from the outside, but inevitable from within. And because of that, they left something behind. A work, a story, a way of living that still speaks today.